July 21st, 1957. Hotel Latham, Manhattan, New York. According to FBI operational reports, federal agents arrived at room 505 of the Hotel Latham at approximately 7:23 a.m. The hotel register listed the occupant as Emil R. Goldfuss. Records indicate he had checked in 3 days earlier. FBI case files describe the arrest as proceeding without incident. When agents knocked and identified themselves, the occupant opened the door and permitted entry. The individual confirmed his name as Emil Goldfuss when asked. What agents recovered during the subsequent search would confirm what the FBI had suspected for weeks. The man living as a commercial artist in Brooklyn was operating as a Soviet intelligence officer. His name was not Emil Goldfuss. In trial documents, he would be referred to as Rudolf Ivanovich Abel, though Western intelligence agencies later concluded this was also likely an alias. Declassified records from the 1990s indicate his actual name was William Fisher, born in England in 1903 to Russian parents. For nearly 9 years, he had operated inside the United States as what intelligence services call an illegal, a deep cover officer with no official diplomatic protection. This episode presents the documented case of a Soviet intelligence officer who maintained cover as an artist in New York, managed communications for a covert network, and was exposed when one of his couriers defected to Western authorities. How does an intelligence officer operate undetected in an American city for nearly a decade? And what happens when a single defection unravels an entire network? Late 1948, entry and establishment. According to Western intelligence assessments compiled after Fisher's arrest, he entered North America through Canada in late 1948. His training background, pieced together from Soviet records accessed after the Cold War, included extensive instruction in radio operation, cryptography, and false identity maintenance. He had served during World War II in Soviet signals intelligence. Intelligence analysts believe he was selected for deep cover work based on language proficiency. He spoke fluent English and German and operational discipline. Fisher crossed into the United States from Canada sometime between late 1948 and early 1949. Immigration records from the period do not contain entries matching his actual identity, consistent with illegal infiltration protocols. He settled in New York City and assumed the identity of Emil R. Goldfuss. Documentation associated with this identity suggested a European immigrant background and work in commercial art and photography. In 1949 or 1950, Fisher rented studio space in Brooklyn at 252 Fulton Street. FBI reports compiled during the investigation described the studio as containing painting supplies, photographic equipment, and darkroom facilities. Witness statements taken after his arrest indicate neighbors knew him as a quiet, somewhat reclusive artist who kept irregular hours and rarely discussed his personal background. 1949 to 1957. Operational period. Counterintelligence analysis conducted after Fisher's arrest concluded that his primary role was communications and logistics rather than direct intelligence collection. He operated as a node within a network, transmitting messages, preparing materials, and coordinating contact between other operatives and handlers abroad. Evidence recovered during searches included a shortwave radio transmitter capable of sending encrypted communications, one-time cipher pads, single-use encryption keys written on paper, designed to be destroyed after use, hollowed-out objects, coins, batteries, bolts modified to conceal microfilm, photographic and darkroom equipment, used to produce microfilm copies of documents. FBI technical analysis confirmed the equipment was consistent with Soviet intelligence tradecraft documented in other cases. Fisher's cover as an artist provided operational advantages. Artists maintained irregular schedules, worked alone, traveled to exhibitions, and possessed equipment, cameras, chemicals, tools that could serve intelligence purposes without appearing suspicious. Records indicate he exhibited artwork at small local shows and maintained professional contacts within Brooklyn's art community. For approximately 9 years, nothing in Emil Goldfuss's documented activities triggered counterintelligence attention. His exposure resulted not from surveillance or pattern recognition, but from the defection of an associate. May 6, 1957. Defection in Paris. Reino Häyhänen, a Finnish-born Soviet intelligence officer, operating under the alias Vic, had worked as a courier within the same network as Fisher. According to CIA debriefing records, Häyhänen was recalled to Moscow in the spring of 1957. Rather than comply, he entered the U.S. Embassy in Paris on May 6th and requested political asylum. Subsequent debriefings, conducted by CIA and FBI officers over several weeks, revealed information about Soviet illegal operations in the United States. Häyhänen's knowledge was compartmentalized. He did not know the real names or complete operational details of most individuals in the network, but he provided descriptions of procedures, locations, and one individual in particular. He described a senior illegal operating in Brooklyn under artistic cover. He provided details about dead drop locations in New York City and signal protocols, chalk marks, newspaper advertisements used to coordinate exchanges. Most significantly, he explained the purpose of an unusual piece of evidence the FBI had been holding since 1954, the hollow nickel. In June of 1954, a Brooklyn newspaper delivery boy named Jimmy Bozart accidentally dropped a nickel that split open on impact. Inside was a tiny photograph, a microfilm containing columns of numbers. The boy reported the discovery to local police, who forwarded it to the FBI. For 3 years, Bureau cryptanalysts had been unable to decrypt the message or determine its origin. Häyhänen's debriefing provided context. According to his account, documented in FBI case files, the hollow nickel was a concealment device used to transport microfilm. He stated the coin had likely been intended for him but was lost in the field. With this information, FBI investigators now understood what they were looking for and where to look. June to July 1957. Surveillance and arrest. FBI surveillance of Fisher began in mid-June of 1957, following Häyhänen's debriefing. Surveillance logs document his movements between his Brooklyn studio and various Manhattan locations. Agents photographed him at parks, subway stations, and public spaces. Records indicate he maintained regular routines: mornings at a neighborhood diner, work periods in the studio, afternoon walks. Surveillance teams noted occasional variations consistent with counter-surveillance awareness route changes, pauses at locations that could serve as signal sites, but these observations were not conclusive. In early July, according to hotel records, Fisher checked out of his Brooklyn studio and registered at the Hotel Latham in Manhattan. The reason for this move is not documented in available records. Some intelligence historians have speculated he detected surveillance, but FBI reports do not confirm this. On July 21st, 1957, federal agents executed an arrest warrant at the Hotel Latham. Search and evidence recovery. The search of Fisher's hotel room and former studio yielded materials consistent with covert communications operations. Shortwave radio equipment, cipher materials, including one-time pads, hollowed-out concealment devices containing microfilm, photography and darkroom equipment, false identity documents in the name Emil R. Goldfuss. FBI interrogation summaries, declassified in later years, indicate Fisher confirmed his name as Emil Goldfuss, but declined to answer questions about the materials or his activities. According to case records, he requested legal counsel. James B. Donovan, a New York attorney, was assigned to represent him. October to November 1957. Trial and sentencing. Fisher was tried in federal court in Brooklyn beginning in October of 1957. Court records show he was charged under Title 18 United States Code with conspiracy to transmit defense information to a foreign government. The prosecution presented the physical evidence and called Häyhänen as a witness. Defense counsel challenged Häyhänen's credibility, citing his documented alcohol problems and the circumstances of his defection. The defense did not dispute that Fisher had engaged in intelligence activities. Legal arguments focused on sentencing considerations and the nature of his role logistical rather than involving direct theft of classified materials. Throughout the trial, Fisher was referred to as Rudolf Ivanovich Abel, a name that appeared in some of his forged documents. His actual identity as William Fisher would not be confirmed until years later through additional intelligence research. On October 25, 1957, the jury returned a guilty verdict. On November 15th, Fisher was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. He was transferred to the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, Georgia. Court transcripts describe his demeanor during sentencing as composed and without visible reaction. 1958 to 1962, imprisonment and exchange negotiations. Fisher served slightly more than 4 years in federal custody. Prison records indicate minimal external contact beyond correspondence with his attorney, James Donovan. In May of 1960, a separate event created diplomatic complications. An American U-2 reconnaissance aircraft, piloted by Francis Gary Powers, was shot down over Soviet territory. Powers was captured, tried in Moscow, and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. According to declassified State Department communications, Soviet authorities indicated willingness to negotiate a prisoner exchange. The name they proposed was Rudolf Abel. James Donovan was recruited by U.S. government officials to serve as an unofficial negotiator. Negotiations proceeded through back channels over several months. An agreement was reached in early 1962, February 10, 1962, Glienicke Bridge, Berlin. The exchange took place at the Glienicke Bridge connecting West Berlin to Potsdam, East Germany. According to diplomatic records and photographic documentation from the event, both prisoners were released simultaneously and walked across the bridge from opposite directions. Fisher crossed into East Germany and was received by Soviet officials. Powers crossed into West Berlin and was received by American officials. The exchange was completed without incident. Post-exchange intelligence reports indicate Fisher returned to Moscow, where he received a pension and worked for a period in intelligence training roles. He remained largely out of public view. He died in Moscow in 1971. Powers returned to the United States, underwent debriefing, and was cleared of misconduct allegations. He later worked as a helicopter pilot and died in a crash in 1977. Analysis and legacy. The Fisher case became a primary study example in Western counterintelligence training programs. Declassified case analysis identifies several operational principles illustrated by the case. Long-term cover effectiveness. Fisher operated undetected for approximately 9 years using plausible civilian cover that integrated naturally into his environment. Communications security. Use of one-time pads and dead drops minimized electronic and physical exposure. Compartmentalization. Network structure limited Fisher's direct contact with high-value sources, reducing damage when he was compromised. Human vulnerability. Despite technical and procedural security, the network collapsed due to a single defection. Physical evidence value. The hollow nickel, unexplained for 3 years, became critical once Häyhänen provided operational context. Intelligence assessments compiled from Soviet archives accessed after 1991 indicate Fisher was considered a capable and disciplined officer. The intelligence he transmitted was characterized as valuable for long-term strategic assessment rather than immediate tactical application. Damage assessment conducted by U.S. counterintelligence concluded that materials handled through Fisher's network did not include high-classification weapons data or detailed military plans. The intelligence involved lower-level assessments, biographical information, and technical details collected over extended periods. The case also illustrated operational strain factors. Häyhänen's defection was attributed in debriefing reports to psychological pressure, isolation, and substance abuse, rather than ideological disagreement. His breakdown demonstrated how long-term covert operations create personal stress that can compromise network security regardless of technical precautions. Fisher's own operational resilience under similar conditions was noted in intelligence analyses, though records provide no insight into his internal experience. Present assessment. The Rudolf Abel case remains one of the most documented examples of a Soviet illegal operation inside the United States during the Cold War period. Available materials include FBI case files, trial transcripts, surveillance photographs, evidence documentation, and post-Cold War analysis drawing on Soviet archival sources. The case demonstrates how effectively a trained operative could maintain cover in American society and how human factors, specifically defection, could compromise even well-constructed networks. The story has been examined in historical studies, documentaries, and a major film, Bridge of Spies, which dramatized legal and diplomatic aspects of the prisoner exchange. At its operational core, the case represents a methodical intelligence operation conducted through patient tradecraft, encrypted radio transmissions, microfilm concealment, dead drop protocols, and sustained identity maintenance over years. William Fisher spent nearly a decade as Emil Goldfuss, maintaining a fabricated identity thoroughly enough that those who knew him found no reason for suspicion. When that identity was exposed through Häyhänen's defection, what remained for the historical record was documentary evidence, surveillance logs, recovered equipment, trial proceedings, and photographs of a bridge in Berlin, where two prisoners crossed paths and returned to their respective sides. If you value factual Cold War history documentation, feel free to comment, subscribe, and leave a like to support Cold War Files.